Hello everybody, it's Root Beer, and it's time for episode 11 of Executioner. Can you believe we're already at the penultimate episode? One more week and the series is done. In this week's episode, Pandemonium! It's the title of the episode and a pretty apt description of everything that happens. We pick up where things left off last week with the battle between Pandemonium and Menno. And unfortunately, the show has kind of lost the spark that it's had in the last couple of weeks. We are unfortunately back to the first half fight quality where both sides kind of take turns hitting at each other. Part of the problem is I think the scripture just doesn't look very impressive. Casting from the scripture happens very quickly in the anime, so it kind of lacks that visual punch. It kind of lacks the gravitas of really conjuring up a big spell before throwing the attack out. The novels make it really dramatic because every time you invoke the scripture, it reads out an entire passage from it. So you have what amounts to a big dramatic incantation before the spell effect goes out. And that just doesn't work very well visually, where they just dump all of that text on the screen. And the passages themselves can be pretty long, so having the voice actress read them out every time would probably be impractical. And so there's no dramatic incantation, there's no, big visual buildup of power, the spells all just happen. Setting aside the visual quality, the fight sequences are also broken up by several instances of talking, which did also happen in the novels, but written down, this dialogue is only a couple sentences and you can read through it pretty quickly. When an actual person has to speak these things out loud at a reasonable human pace, then it suddenly takes a couple of minutes to get through it all. And there's only so much time in one episode. And finally, the fight in the novel is just more elaborate. In the anime, Pandemonium opens a portal to summon more demons, and Menno immediately destroys it. But in the novels, Pandemonium actually summons an army of ghosts to try and assault Menno's spirit, and then they all get destroyed by the stakes. And during the rat sequence, Pandemonium actually sacrifices most of her limbs, and they keep growing and mutating and becoming more grotesque with each limb she sacrifices. That sequence might have gotten a bit redundant had they translated it entirely from the novels, but at the end of the day, it still means that the fight wasn't nearly as crazy or over the top as it was in the novels. Anyways, that's enough complaining about the fight scenes. During the aforementioned talking sequence, it's revealed that Pandemonium's motivations for this entire incident is to do a movie. Unfortunately, we lost a humorous line from the novels where Menno has to puzzle through what doing a movie means. She understands the concept of what a movie is, but she doesn't actually know about how to make one. This motivation is appropriately weird and chaotic for our evil little gremlin. It takes all of her chaotic evil energy and frames it in the shallow surface traits of her former self. Whether she wins or loses, as long as everything is exciting, it's all good in her book. After expending all of her energy destroying the swarm of rats, Menno gets beaten down by Pandemonium. But she is saved by the timely intervention of Hime-chama. The two of them team up and enact a plan to trap Pandemonium by connecting the two heavenly and earthly ley lines together. The sequence ended up being a lot more gruesome than I think it was in the novels, but I think that works to the show's favor, kinda makes it seem a little more dramatic. And there's a cute little sequence afterwards where Ashina gets a bit worked up over Momo's current condition. Unfortunately, our heroes can't revel in their victory for very long because the plan doesn't work. Pandemonium summons a big monster out of the fog and just escapes immediately. We then cut over to Akari where she's greeted by a second Pandemonium. Their conversation reveals a lot of new information for the audience. We already knew that Akari had used up a lot of her memories, but this week we find out that she's basically on the verge of becoming an error herself. We also learn that her past memories of Japan were not particularly pleasant. The flashback implies that she was being bullied. It helps to explain why Akari is so willing to just devote herself entirely to Menno. We also learn that Akari is responsible for freeing Pandemonium. All of Akari's regressions put too much stress on the fog keeping Pandemonium back, and she was able to escape from a little hole in it, albeit just her pinky finger. And finally, the biggest revelation we get is that all of Akari's past failures are no accident. There's a greater power at play behind the world, and it has memories of everything that's happened, even through all of Akari's regressions. And there are a select few who are allowed to access these memories, which means there's a reason why Flare is always the choke point in these resets. This has a ton of implications for the future of this story. There is the question of what is the Lord and how does it relate to the Lost Ones? And if Flare knows everything that's going to happen, then how are they going to overcome her? Akari has already failed God knows how many times, and according to Pandemonium, she's at the end of her rope. Akari is probably out of redos at this point. It calls back to what Monon said in the previous episode, that if Akari has failed all these times, perhaps Menno is going to be the one that has to change everything. Pandemonium notes during the episode that Menno reminds her of Ivory, so there's probably something going on there. Menno is the main character after all. Of course, there could also be another solution to their problem. The last big reveal that Pandemonium has for us is that there is indeed a way to go back to Japan. This could be the solution that Akari needs for her problem. If Akari just goes home, then the job is over. There's no lost one to be executed and no reason for Menno to die by Flare's hand. Of course, this is Pandemonium, so assuming that she's telling the truth, there's probably some sort of twist to this method. After all, if it was easy, someone would have done it already, whether that's a lost one going home or someone from this world trying to go to Japan. Our episode ends back with Menno and Ashna. Menno manages to figure out that we are not seeing the real Pandemonium, and the big monster she summoned can't leave the fog. And with all her cards on the table, Pandemonium decides that it's time for the grand finale and transforms into a big dumb CGI monster. It's really jarring to look at, especially because they hand-drew the big tentacle monster that came out of the fog. I guess a centipede made of human limbs is kind of a pain in the ass to hand-draw. And that's it for the episode. Overall, the episode is fine. It's not great, though. The fights just weren't as impressive as they could be, and the CGI centipede monster does not inspire a lot of confidence either. On the lore side of things, the episode is much better and gives us a lot of new information to chew on. That being said, we are also approaching the end of the season, so if they actually adapt the rest of the novel up through the epilogue, this season is going to end on some pretty nasty cliffhangers. I'm keeping up with the novels, but, anime onlys, you better hope for a season 2. But that is for the future to decide. For now, we are at the end of this video. As always, if you like the video, be sure to appease the algorithm for me. I draw the background art for the videos myself, link will be in the description. You can also follow me on Twitter at Plasma Eclipse. I also draw things that aren't related to this show, and once I'm done with these weekly episode reveals, I'll probably go back to that. So if you like the art, there you go.